So when I was really young, I hated meditating. And yoga and meditation is where my spiritual practice started. That was actually in the 90s, where things weren't quite as in vogue as they are now. And I spent a couple of summers living on an ashram in the United States. It's actually located in Virginia, called Swami Satchidananda Ashram. It's also called Yogaville. And there was a very traditional Indian guru there. And I just remember spending a lot of time trying to meditate, and I hated it. And I found it very frustrating, and it was difficult to sit, and my eyes hurt for some reason, I'm not sure why. But I didn't enjoy it, and I probably could have tried doing it for longer, but it just didn't feel right to me. And I started to come across the works of Jiddu Krishnamurti, and I really liked his philosophy, and it really drew me to a more intellectual avenue of spirituality. And one of his tenets is the idea that there is an inherent conflict in meditation. So when we meditate, we're essentially trying to force our minds to focus. And there are all sorts of different types of meditation techniques, but the type of technique I'm talking about is the technique where you basically try to focus your mind on one point, whether it's breathing, whether it's your third eye, whether it is a mantra that's given to you by a guru. They actually did that on the ashram. And so what Krishnamurti talks about is an inherent conflict in that, a forcing and an effort involved in that. And that rang true with me. And I studied Krishnamurti's work for years, eventually started having my own revelations, and have been sort of on this path of self-inquiry and passive self-awareness for a while now. The other part of meditation that really I was a little skeptical about was the notion that you could meditate sitting quietly in a room by yourself and find a certain degree of peace, but then when you went out into the world, any little thing that bothered you could make you upset. And so it seemed to me that meditation was maybe okay in a vacuum, and you could derive some sense of peace that way, but I was looking for a practice that was broader, that was applicable to daily life, because it seemed to me that daily life was where I had all of my problems, all of my struggles. And so meditation from that standpoint seemed disconnected. Krishnamurti talked more about meditation throughout your life and what that could mean. And it's essentially a state of self-awareness throughout your entire day, not just when you're meditating and sitting still. And that rang true for me and still rings true for me. And for me, that's the only way that I've been able to contend with the various issues that I have on a daily basis. It's the only thing that has really helped me to actually resolve a lot of my issues with day-to-day living. But as a lot of my beliefs have resolved, as a lot of my opinions have resolved, my mind has become more open. And with that opening, I've sort of started to rethink some things that I've held fast. As much as Krishnamurti talked about letting go of all your beliefs, a lot of the things that he teaches can become beliefs, and I think meditation is perhaps one of them. And I recorded a previous video where I was talking about the feeling that I felt like I was plateauing spiritually. And so I've sort of opened my mind up to the notion of meditation again. And I was speaking with someone who suggested trying to meditate again. And so I figured, why not? I mean, what is the harm in giving that a go again? Now, I will say I'm still pretty convinced that the idea of trying to focus the mind on one particular object invites a degree of effort and conflict that I just don't see the validity of. So I started meditating in a different way. And I'm sure somebody has described this before. I'm sure I didn't make it up. But the idea would be just to sit quietly, close my eyes, and just be in silence. And the first thing to think about is, wow, how often do we intentionally sit in silence like that? I talked recently about all the time spent in front of screens, busy with work, occupied, family, friends, constantly occupied mind. So first and foremost, to just sit quietly with an unoccupied mind, that to me is already a win. So then what have I actually been doing? So I've been sitting on my couch in a sort of cross-legged position, very comfortably, closing my eyes. And basically that's kind of it. Sitting quietly with my eyes closed. The mind does what it does, thinks about whatever it's going to think about, or thinks about nothing, and there's just silence. And when it does think about things, I simply am aware of it, not touching it, not trying to control it. And what's interesting is that, to me, there's different types of thinking. There's a thinking that feels very sort of free and easy to me, and then there are issues that arise. You think about something that upsets you, and then you sort of are able to be passively aware of if anger comes up, if regret comes up. So in a way, what I'm doing when I'm sitting is what I do all day long. It really is no different. The only slight difference is you're up and about and doing things. But to be honest, it's basically the same thing. So if it's the same thing, then it's not really like it's right or wrong to do it. The idea is passive awareness of these thoughts as they come through your head. And so I have found it nice, quiet time, away from screens, not a fully occupied mind, always doing something or other. And in the beginning, I felt there was some anxiety about it, some compulsion. It's not that easy to sit still like that these days. We're constantly occupied. We're constantly reaching for our phones. And so I would feel like this compulsion to do. And so I just remained aware with that. And that's kind of tapered off pretty quickly. And now I'm able to just sit quietly at peace. If the mind wants to do something, it does. If it doesn't, that's fine too. And just be passively aware of all the activity of the mind. And I think that that's a nice spiritual practice, and I'm actually enjoying it. I don't feel like there's an inherent conflict, a sense of control or discipline. And I think it's something that's sort of adding to my day in a very nice way. So if you feel like it, give it a try.